Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you today. Today, it's a very unique special. You can do it. You know, the show that I've been doing. And the idea is that from the beginning of time, we always blamed women. Not that I'm a woman or anything, but we know that even if we go to the day that the apple was like the problem, I don't know, or Eve, but in the end, Adam ate the apple and he was out of heaven. And they blamed Eve for that. Later on, for years and centuries, women always have to be blamed for the throne. They couldn't take it. Even they had this taboo related to being virgin things and to be always having ethics and values and differences. Imagine if in a place like United States between 1960 or 1970, they had their first movement to bring forth the idea of equality between men and women. Today, we know that we are just rising power or an empire, and I'm sure that my guest is now smiling because I'm gonna talk with him about this, and he's a very interesting guest, and I know that you might wonder that it's a contradiction, but trust me, it's a beautiful contradiction. And we're gonna hone to the idea together to come to a point that we will just agree upon certain points related to all humanity. But today our guest has a different point of view. Coach Michael Tyler, who is a leading authority on the changing roles of manhood and masculinity. He has written 6 books about man issues, hosted a cable television show, and has a podcast that titled A New Conversation with Men, not women, which has been airing for more than 12 years. He considers himself to be an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible, and he has committed his life to empowering, again, I'm saying the word, men, and helps them to transform their lives from the inside out. And I can see, on the screen behind him, Coach Michael Tyler, all the way from Texas, that he has a new conversation with men. So I'm very happy to welcome him, and very interesting. You're having a conversation with a woman. How do you feel about that?
Well, Natalie, first of all, thank you for having me on your show. I'm really looking forward to our dynamic conversation. And ultimately, we have the same goal, which is to bring humanity together so that everyone lives in harmony and peace. That's the goal. And as you mentioned, since the beginning of time, women have been in somewhat of a subservient, less than role. That's since the beginning of time. But I'm an optimist. And what I see is that the roles of manhood and masculinity are changing. Women have taken on new roles. And, when the women's rights movement started back in the early 50s, women decided, we don't want to just be barefoot and pregnant. We want to be out and be able to vote and to have jobs and all of that. So that set in motion this whole new paradigm for the world. Women started gaining their power. They realized that they didn't necessarily need men, but obviously they want men to be partners with. But all the dynamics are now changing. So for me, it's easy for us to look at the world because it is patriarchal. It is driven basically by men. But I say...
Oh, I love that word. I don't want to interrupt, but I love when you confess that. It's beautiful. Yes, go on. Yes, Coach Michael.
So the patriarchal system has been in existence for thousands of years. But I will assert that what I believe is that patriarchal system is breaking down. That patriarchal system is no longer sustainable. Why? For a couple of reasons. First of all, because women decided they wanted to do something different. And so that set in motion them being able to get equality. But see, what a lot of people don't realize is that in the US, for example, there are more women in the workforce now than men. There's also more women graduating from college than men. So all of the dynamics have changed, the roles have changed. And so the patriarchal makeup has been broken down for the better.
But, I love this word. such positive words, and then I read what you have a new conversation with men. It's amazing. I mean, how can you embrace the female gender? And it's amazing, honestly. I mean, I'm saying it with all my heart, you know. I mean, it's very impressive. A coach, I mean, who had been doing this far and getting this far to know about men and to be their advocate and just saying these things. It means that there is empathy with our gender.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, as mentioned again, I'm an optimist, and I see the world through the lens of evolution. And again, I believe humanity is still evolving. And most people see all the negative stuff in the world, but I'm an optimist, and I see that the world is actually moving in the right direction. Now, there's going to be a lot of challenges, as if there's always been, but humanity is waking up, from my experience, from my research. So what we have to do is have to stop blaming each other, pointing fingers at each other, and figure out how we can make it work for everyone. Now, what's been missing, I believe, is a conversation geared towards men to wake them up to recognize the power of the patriarchal system and help them understand that it's time for that system to change. It's time for it to evolve. And so in doing so, I believe we will eradicate a lot of the social issues that plague our world, like domestic abuse and sexual assault and all of that, by engaging men in this new conversation that talks about how creating a new paradigm of masculinity can improve men's lives in all areas.
It's very important what you're talking about, the system, but you know, I don't know that you know the details, but you know that I come from Middle East. I have been born and raised there for over 33 years. So I thought that this complex, you know, inferiority or superiority, I cannot say, but there's this kind of complex when it comes to male gender over there. And when we talked and we connected and you talked about these points, even though I talk about this also in my book, like they always blame women, I just thought that the problem is only there. But I see that you also have this chaotic problem, a risky one over here in the United States. I mean, it's everywhere. So does Michael Tyler, as a coach and as a person who's advocate, and he realizes everything which is going on in the world when it comes to this system, does he blame the society, the way that we are raised?
Well, again, I'm not one to place blame.
Let's say not blame. Let's say, why do you think that, or where does it come from, this idea that he's a boy and he's going to be a man, he has more rights, etc., etc. It goes on for centuries. I mean, this is some kind of collusion and this battle, as like it's like this, not anger, but the confrontation. Where does it come from?
If we go back to the beginning of time, men have always had the role, if you will. They had three primary responsibilities, okay? Since the caveman days, okay? The three primary responsibilities. The three P's: provide, protect, procreate, okay? So that's the three things that men have been conditioned to believe that that's what we're supposed to do. Well, as humanity evolved, we gained knowledge, we gained wisdom, we started growing, but then men still had the idea that they were somehow superior, that they were better than. Mm-hmm. Now, you can relate that to the Bible, saying that Adam was first and women came second, but it's just a story.
But even though you don't believe that maybe God said, I can do better and create women, you don't believe in that, right?
Maybe that's true. But
wow, it's a confession. Oh my God, these are going to be three confession from the coach, Michael Tyler. Oh my God, it's amazing.
But once again, the intention has never been to make women inferior to men. But unfortunately, a lot of men misinterpreted the idea that because they were born first, they had rights over women. And that's how it all started. But again, it's now changing. the roles are changing dramatically. For example, I just saw in Saudi Arabia, for example, where the men there obviously have this idea that women are less than and they still aren't allowed to do a lot of things. But now they're allowing women to drive and they're allowing women to do things that haven't been done before. So that supports my idea of evolution. We're evolving. Humanity is waking up. Women have placed their, raised their hands and said, look, we're not going to just be less than. And that's moving all around the globe. It may appear to be slow, but it's moving in the right direction. That's how I see it.
Because I just see that we're talking about men, but we see very powerful institutions are based, and the leaders are always men. I mean, even I'm not going to go into religious details. I mean, we never see a female pope, right?
Mm-hmm. But see, here's the thing. There's such a thing in around the globe called International Men's Day. Have you ever heard of it?
Never. I know Women's International Day.
Okay. No, November 19th is a day that's recognized in several countries as International Men's Day. Now, feminists get really upset saying, why do we need an International Men's Day when men dominate and control everything?
Oh, I love it, because every day is your day, right?
That's what some people would assume. But if that's the case, why is it that men commit more suicide than women? Men are more depressed than women? Men do more of the violent acts than women? So if men are so great, why are we so unhappy? So my point is, in order to transform the world, men must engage in a new conversation. We must engage in a conversation that allows us as men to recognize that the old antiquated ways of being a man no longer serve us, and it's time to embrace some new ways.
But Coach Michael, I know that you have been being involved and speaking about men and their issues more than 25 years now. And how did you become involved with men issues? I mean, how did you decide? I mean, knowing that there is this diversity, I know that you are happily married and you have children. I know that you have been gone through the worst and rose back from the ashes and you stood back on your feet. And now, I mean, you have been having this happy life, which I see, and I can congratulate you for that. And I see that as a coach, you inspire men. I mean, how did you end up being, concentrating on these? Is this the reason that coming from your own pain?
Yeah, great question. And here's the answer. When I was 23 years old, I was living the American dream. I had the house, the wife, the 2.5 kids and all that. And by society standards, I was successful. Within about a 6-year time frame, my American dream turned into the American nightmare as I went through a divorce, a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, a deep, deep state of depression. I was homeless for 2 years, living out of a car.
Wow.
And during the darkest period of my life, I asked myself a question. And that question was, what does it mean to be a man? Because I had done everything I thought a man was supposed to do to be happy, and I was absolutely miserable. And so by asking myself that question, I began this journey of transformation and started asking myself, how can I become a better man? And that question led me on this amazing journey of transformation that I still continue today. So
you think that this, overcoming this, everything that you've been through, and you also mentioned in your book that you received a miracle. So can you just let us into this miracle and tell us about it? Because I mean, sometimes we think that there is a miracle, maybe when it is related to our own subconscious mind, or maybe because it's our will, because wherever there is a will, there's a way. So is this truly a miracle? Because what I see today, whatever you have been through, I can just say out loud that yes, it should have been a miracle because where you are today. But if you just tell us the story, it will be very interesting to share with our audience.
So here's the miracle. During the darkest period of my life, I mean, I was so depressed that I was even thinking about taking my own life. And one night I was sitting at the edge of my bed, looking across the room at my bookshelf when I happened to notice that every book on my bookshelf had something to do with getting rich or making money. And as I looked at those books, this question just popped in my head. And it wasn't just a question, it was like a voiceless voice said, Michael, what if you took all the energy and effort you've used in trying to get rich and simply figure out how to be happy? Now, I can't put into words the feeling that came over me, but all of a sudden, my depression lifted, and I had this amazing clarity that I was going to be able to rebuild my life. And intuitively, I knew that my life was going to become extraordinary. And as a result of asking myself that one simple question, I stopped reading books on getting rich and making money. And I started reading books on psychology and philosophy and spirituality and metaphysics and personal development. So I went on this amazing journey of transformation to, number one, figure out how to be happy. Because like most men, I thought being happy meant having all the stuff, all the money, the houses, the women, all of that. But that question challenged me to stop looking outside of myself and to start looking within. And there's a saying that I love that goes, if you don't go within, you will always go without. And so in order for us to be really happy with ourselves, we can't look outside of ourselves. We have to be willing to look within. And that question, that miracle, is what literally changed my life, because it challenged me for the first time in my life to go within.
It's very amazing the transformation that you had, and you shifted from here to here. And I think that it came within your own power. I'm not trying to make assumptions, but I'm just realizing that this awakening or this kind of self-realization needs strength, and you're brave enough to realize where you were and where you should be. And I also know that you talk a lot and about the thing which is related to some stories today, which is like related to sexual assault from some high profile celebrities, and everybody is talking about the thing which is called like toxic masculinity. And we will be, interested to know, as a man and as somebody who has been coaching men and being into their heads, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, there's this whole idea that there's something called toxic masculinity.
Yes.
And it's been, you turn on the television and you see all these stories about sexual assault, as you mentioned, and domestic violence, and people equate that to toxic masculinity. Well, it is my belief that there is no such thing as toxic masculinity. There are toxic behaviors, but those behaviors are the result of a man not being connected to his authentic masculinity. So look at it this way. As a human being, we all have emotions, we have feelings.
True.
So look at masculinity as simply an energy. So masculinity is the energy or the feeling of what I call doingness. Femininity, on the other hand, is the energy of beingness. Okay, you with me? So if I talk about masculinity and I talk about the doingness energy, a woman can have masculine traits. For example, if you're highly ambitious like yourself, and
Thank you. I think it is a compliment. Thank you so much, Coach Michael.
Yeah, so you're driven, you've accomplished a lot, you've done some amazing things. So that's something in you that drives you to success is what I consider to be a masculine energy.
Wow. So again, you're just defending men. Why should it be without the word male masculinity?
But hold on. So the flip side of that, of masculinity, is femininity, which is the being energy. So being energy is all in being in touch with how you feel, your intuition, your imagination. So women have masculine and feminine energies, just like men have masculine and feminine energies. But they're two sides of the same coin. But what society has done is they put up this label called toxic masculinity, and they say that man is exhibiting toxic masculinity, when in reality he's not. He's exhibiting a toxic behavior because he hasn't addressed what's keeping him from experiencing his masculine and feminine sides.
And so, what is that?
I'm sorry?
And what is that? What he has to do to get rid of?
What he has to do is be willing to wake up from what I call the 5 illusions of manhood, which we're going to talk about. How does a man wake up and not do or engage in those negative behaviors? Because what drives most men's negative behaviors are these 5 illusions of manhood. And so if you're ready, I'll go into those.
I'm ready. I was ready when we started the conversation. I'm very interested to know.
Okay. So the first illusion that drives negative male behavior is, to be a man, you must be non-emotional and disconnected. Now, here in the...
It makes sense, because like...
Herein lies
themselves.
Yeah. So from a very early age, men are taught and conditioned to believe that they aren't supposed to feel. We're taught that feelings are for women. We're taught from a very early age, big boys don't cry. Don't express how you feel. And so what men begin to do is they start suppressing and repressing emotions. Well, emotions are just energy in motion. And if you have a feeling like sadness or anger, and you suppress it, it stays bottled up until you learn how to release it. Unfortunately, men who have not been taught how to deal with their emotions, they have all this pent up frustration, anger, and all of that. And then something will happen in their lives and explode. For example, if you look at a person that goes into a school and just randomly starts shooting someone, okay, what is that about? It's about repressed anger that hasn't been dealt with. And the only way that person knows how to deal with that anger is through a violent act. That's not toxic masculinity. That's a person who has been so hurt and traumatized that the only way they can deal with it is by trying to hurt others. Now, in no way does that justify their actions. But if you want to look at the cause of every violent act, the cause is always the emotion of anger. And
so it's not a justification. This is a fact.
Yes, this is a fact, because anger, the emotion of anger, when a person feels a lot of, especially suppressed anger, what happens is, it is that feeling that drives their behavior, and they aren't able to think rationally. Because that energy is so strong and so powerful, they can't really think. They're just acting out of that energy of anger. So what happens is, men from a very early age, they have all these emotions that they don't know how to deal with. And the only one that most men are comfortable with really is anger.
And violence.
Which leads to violence. But see, men aren't comfortable saying, I'm afraid, or I'm sad, because that's a sign of weakness for a lot of men. So until we start giving men the tools and the outlets to deal with that, with all of their emotions, then we'll never really see a change in all of the violence we see in the world. It begins with a man's willingness to realize that being in touch with your emotions doesn't make you less of a man, doesn't make you female, doesn't make you gay. It's simply being in touch with your humanity. So what we have to...
This is the first illusion, right?
I'm sorry?
This is the first illusion.
This is the first illusion.
We have a lot to deal with yet, men, right?
Yes. So, but it's the foundation of negative male behavior. It's not toxic masculinity. It's men have trapped, suppressed emotions that they don't know how to express. Now, and let me share this. After my divorce, I had a really difficult time creating relationships. And all of my relationships were ending the same way. They'd last about 3 to 4 weeks. And all the women would say the same thing. I care too much about you to stay in this relationship because you're emotionally unavailable. Now, back then, that made absolutely no sense to me. I couldn't understand what they meant because I was a nice guy. I had no problems with monogamy. You know, I was a good guy. So why were they saying that? Well, it wasn't until I began my inner emotional journey that I figured out and learned that they were absolutely correct. I was emotionally unavailable because I had a lot of childhood trauma stuff that I hadn't dealt with. And so I had to be willing to deal with that, feel it and heal it and release it. And that's how I became free. As a result of that, I now have an 18-year marriage that I'm absolutely blissful in.
Congrats. I'm so happy for you. You deserve
But again, I have to be willing to do my own emotional healing work, which unfortunately a lot of men aren't willing to do. But that's why it's so important for us to wake up from that illusion that men aren't supposed to be in touch with their emotions.
Brilliant.
So that's illusion number one. Do we have time for another one? Number two is that to be a man, you must use sexual conquest as a gauge for manhood. You see,
yeah, they just keep on bragging about their relationships. I've been with this girl, I've been with that girl. I mean, it's like a competition, right? I have seen it all the time.
Well, if you look at our society, you know, we hear the marketing term is sex sales. So we're constantly bombarded with all these visuals of sexuality and sex. And for men, it starts really early that our goal is to sleep with as many women as possible because that gives us a notch on our belt and makes us appear to be, or that's how we validate our masculinity. And a lot of men are still trapped in this illusion that somehow sleeping with a lot of women or different women, or shall I say, just simply having sex somehow validates their masculinity, when in reality it doesn't. But see, that illusion about sex is what keeps men from being able to connect with intimacy and connection, because they're conditioned to believe that sex is just a physical act, and they're constantly trying to act out this illusion that they have to sleep with women. But what that does is it drives addictions.
What should they do?
I'm sorry?
What is your advice?
I'm sorry?
Change this, what should they do? I mean, to change the state of mind.
First and foremost, you must recognize any unhealed emotional trauma that you haven't dealt with, because that's what drives the behavior.
But the sexual drive, I mean, it starts from a certain age, so it has nothing to do with the childhood trauma. Maybe it's
absolutely.
To do with the society.
It does have something to do. It does have something to do with their sexual, their trauma. Because here's why: if a man has not dealt with his emotional issues, then there's this feeling of I'm not good enough. So what a man does when he doesn't feel good about himself, he finds ways to feel good about himself. So addictions are temporary fixes to feel good about yourself. So for example, if you feel inadequate and you sleep with someone, you experience pleasure. It feels good in that moment, but ultimately there's an emptiness that comes with that. But what happens is when that emptiness comes back, then the man has to go and get it again. He wants to feel good about it. So what does he do? He goes to more sex.
It's guilt. They don't feel guilt. I mean, I'm just asking. I'm not a man. I'm just asking you.
That's also part of it. But the point here is that the addiction is driven by an unresolved emotional conflict in themselves that makes them believe that they're unlovable. Okay? So we overwork, we do drugs, we have sex to try to fill that emotional void in us that says we're not worthy, we're unlovable. And that's how you get rid of addictions. You help men recognize that, first of all, if there's some emotional healing that needs to take place, you help them heal that trauma. And in healing that trauma, they get to their authentic selves. Therefore, they don't have to act out in sexual ways, and they don't have to act out in materialism and stuff, because you teach them how to be happy with themselves. So the reason that so many men act out with sex, because it says in our society that sex is a gauge for manhood. And so men think that they can gauge their masculinity by sex, but that's not true. And that's why so many men are unhappy.
And the third?
And the third illusion is that to be a man, you must have money and material possessions.
Oh my God. Yeah, there is this competition, but I mean, it's also among women.
Sure, absolutely. But see, for men, and again, I thought when I was married, I bought my wife a house, I did all those things, she should be happy. So to me, I was trapped in that illusion that material things would make her happy. And so men get trapped in that idea that they've got to have these external things to be loved. But you take away all the material things and you have just the man there, what do you have? Well, for a lot of men, they're not real comfortable with that because we've been taught that we got to have money and material possessions to be loved. And therefore, what do? We try to buy love. How many times have you ever gone on a date, very first date, and some guy took you to this really fancy, expensive restaurant?
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So
fancy gifts.
Yeah. So we buy stuff. So why do we do that? Because internally, we believe that, well, maybe she won't like me, but she'll like my stuff.
And I just don't want to, intrude in a conversation, but I don't want to be intruder, and just to make a small story, I'm going to tell a story. I'm going to share it with you and the audience. The only person in my whole life who came forth and told me, Michael, honestly, I'm telling you this, and everyone, is my husband, Nidal. He just told me that I have nothing to offer you. And I don't know if you can leave everything behind. Fame and power, whatever you have over there as a TV show host and a journalist, I have nothing to offer you except my heart. He was so honest and confident. I said, oh my God, I have seen a lot of men, but it just let me see and love him, because for the first time, I have seen a man who says things that he means, and he's not scared to say it, and just brings me to the point that you're saying.
But see, that's really powerful, because most men can't do that. Now, here's an interesting
I'm not going to show him this episode because he's going to be very macho and very
But see, to make the point, when my wife, my current wife, and I, when we went on our first date, I took her to Pizza Hut for the first date. Now, I was like your husband. I told her on the very first date, if you're looking for a man that's just going to shower you with gifts and I said, I'm not your guy. I said, but if you're looking for a guy that's willing and ready to commit to you and to create a deep relationship with you and to grow with you, I'm your guy. Well, my wife was a little confused because she never had a guy say that with her, but her friends, most of her friends, who a lot of them were somewhat affluent, they told her not to date me because I took her to Pizza Hut.
Oh my God.
Okay?
But she was smart enough not to be.
Yeah, but she said, I wasn't going to listen to them. She says, because when you talk to me, she said, for the first time, I realized that you just wanted to get to know me. And I said, absolutely. I said, that's the goal, for us to get to know each other so we can create something that really works. And so here we are. We've been together 20 years.
Wow.
But she had been with a lot of guys that tried to buy her love.
But
and then here I come.
Experience also. I'm married to Nidal 12 years now. And I think that we appreciate relationships more with men who, when we had been through tough times with other men, we know the difference. It also goes, two-way, right? It's also us, because we see and we can balance. And because if we haven't seen, maybe we'll just be having these toxic ideas and thoughts that we need to have this stability, because stability is financial. Stability is, as you said, like the power or everything else, which is like the outer appearance. So women also have to have experience and to get over all those taboos and toxic ideas in order to be accepting men. You're smiling. You have something to say. Yeah, go ahead. You're smiling.
But see, what we all want is to just be loved. Not for what we have, not for what we can do, but for who we are. At our core, that's what we want. That's what we long for. We long to be accepted for who we are. And when you can find someone that loves you just for that, now you have the foundation of creating a relationship that'll last forever.
Wow. So we have the first clue, the illusion, about the emotions. The second one is the sexual adventure that comes from the emotion. And the third one, everything which is related to financial and power, security, situation that they feel, which is also toxic. And the fourth?
The fourth is that to be a man, you must have titles, positions, and power.
Yeah.
Now, somehow in our crazy mixed up world, a man with a PhD is sometimes seen as better than a man with just a GED.
But it's not about being better, but even if they approach a woman, they think they are better. This is so funny because they have this confidence, she's gonna be attracted to me because I have all these. I mean, but honestly, I mean, it's between you and me and all of our audience now. Seriously, the issue, it doesn't come only from their confidence. It's even the way that they approach women. They think they can get anyone without even knowing who this woman is.
But see, that's the illusion. A lot of men with PhDs or with degrees think that they are somehow better.
Or power.
Or power. So the point here that I'm making is that for men who do have titles and labels, to recognize that that doesn't necessarily make them a better man, but for men who don't have titles and labels, that they should still be able to love themselves for who they are. Even without a title, they can still be a great man. That's the whole point. And last but not least, the last illusion.
Yeah.
The illusion is to be a man, you must constantly compete with and try to outdo other men. See, there's this hidden code that men are always trying to one up each other. You know, you have guys that, you know, they get a nice car and they go show it to their friends and say, look at my car. And then their friend wants to go out and buy a better one, you know, so there's this competition. Yeah. And we've all heard the term keeping up with the Joneses, right?
I thought that it's keep up with the Kardashians, but it's fine. Like I said,
But that whole idea is driven by this idea that as men, we're supposed to constantly compete against each other. And so what I'm promoting is for men to learn to cooperate with each other and not compete.
Wow. I mean, you know, having this ability to be this aware of your conscious mind, it's amazing. I mean, it takes so much bravery and self-confidence because you don't only know what you're saying, you're just giving the advice and analyzing each toxic point related to men. And I think that these illusions, in some ways, it is for me shocking coming from someone who has been raised in the United States and not in the Middle East, because over there it's so far worse than here. I mean, oh, you have a girl, it's fine, you're gonna have a baby boy soon. Why? Nobody's going to take the kingdom from me. It's just a baby, right? I mean, if I'm blessed, I'm blessed. If I'm not, even though I don't have to have certain things related to society, but over there it's a lot of conflict, Michael, a lot. I mean, it's so huge. It's hard. I mean, it's very painful. And you're mentioning everything that men can do to come out from everything. And as a coach, I really want to know more. I mean, all these things that you're saying that we can come together. I see that this optimistic voice and the smile on your face and the confidence, where is it coming from?
Well, once again, I believe in human evolution. And from a male perspective, I think men have gone through what I'll call the 5 stages, 5 stages of manhood. So the very first stage was what I call the caveman stage. The second stage was what I call the warrior stage. And the warrior stage occurred when human beings gained language and they were able to start communicating. But at the same time, anybody that looked different from them, they would go to war against, because that was the warrior mentality. So then men had to keep evolving. So they evolved from the warrior male to what I call the religious male. And they evolved to the religious male because spiritual people like Jesus and Muhammad and them, they started saying, look, there's a better way to act as men, as human beings. So they created this spiritual awareness. So we evolved to the religious male. And then we evolved to what I call the the information or the intellectual male or the scientific male. So we gained all this knowledge, technology, and all of that. And so men, started seeing that they had different options, but they still were stuck in their heads. And the final stage of masculinity, I believe, is what I call the authentic male. It is the man who takes the time to fully understand who he is and how he fits into the world. He takes the time to learn how to deal with any unresolved emotional conflict he may be dealing with so he can be authentically real. And so, as mentioned, if you look throughout our society, there's lots of things that are wrong, but there are lots of things that are right. So, for example, when I started writing back in 1995, there were very few men talking about these issues. But now there is an infinite amount of coaches and books and seminars and programs targeted specifically to men to support them in creating this new paradigm of masculinity that I'm talking about. So I'm one of many who are simply out there trying to wake men up to a new way of being and expressing as a man. And that's why I'm so optimistic, because I see all the things that are happening. And when I compare it to 25 years ago, it's amazing how many men are now doing this work.
It's amazing just sharing all this information with the audience and coming from you. So well achieved, Coach. I mean, I'm so honored to have you on my show, Michael. And as you know, my show is called You Can Do It. So please, could you just tell to my audience that you can do it? I mean, all of them, and share the most important message that you should.
Well, again, I've overcome some amazing adversities in my own life. And if nothing else, I hope that my story inspires people to recognize that I'm no different than they are. The only difference is I learned to trust that still small voice within me. And so if you're watching this video, you have access to that still small voice within yourself. And you have to be willing to learn to listen to that still small voice within you. It is that still small voice that will guide you to your ultimate destiny. It will guide you to your ultimate healing. But you have to be willing to make the investment in yourself. As mentioned at the beginning, I said, if you don't go within, you will always go without. So you have to be willing to look within your own heart and mind and recognize that no matter what adversity you may be dealing with, no matter what challenge you may be dealing with, you have something inside of you that can support you in overcoming that challenge. Now, you can call that whatever you want to call it. I call it divine intelligence. There's a divine intelligence that permeates the universe, and we all as human beings have access to that. And if we tap into that, nothing is impossible.
Wow. I'm so happy that you were my guest on this show. And I just want to thank you for coming forward and sharing all this information. And of course, we are going to share with the audience your website where they can find you, and especially men, if they dare to, because some of them, they might like, what is he talking about? I think that it is related to awareness. It is related to bravery. It is related if they know that they can be transformed, if they know that they are not happy where they are. So the keys are with Michael Tyler, and you can find him on www.anewconversationwithman.com. Of course, I'm going to share it also below this video. And any comments, any ideas from the audience, please share the video and write whatever you want. And you can reach out to Michael, Coach Michael, if you want to know more, if you dare to know, and you are man enough to know that we can all change. Thank you so much.
And Nataly, let me just throw this. If they go to that website, they can actually get a free copy of my book, A New Conversation with Men. So
see, this is amazing.
Just go to the site, A New Conversation with Men, and I highly recommend women to read it also, because it will give you more insights on why men think the way they do. And I can assure you that the insights and wisdom in the book will also help women as well as men.
I'm going to make sure to read it. And I'm going to make sure that you read my book, Masks too. I don't know if you started, so that's another idea I put the alarm just to know that we're not just having a long conversation, but
Sure.
it was fantastic to have you with me on the show. I mean, it was amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that very soon we will have you again on the show with a different topic. Thank you so much. And I wish you well. And it was such an honor to have you.
The
God
pleasure
bless you,
has been
Michael.
all mine. Thank you, Nataly.
Thank you.